Hollywood has given us plenty of action heroes, but some men weren't acting. They lived it. Scars, war medals, prison time, and real street fights shaped them long before the cameras rolled. These weren't stunt doubles or CGI warriors. They were survivors. From war heroes to ex-cons, from men who clawed their way out of mines to those who fought on real battlefields, their toughness was forged in life, not on set. So who was the toughest of them all? Stick around as we count down the 10 hardest men in Hollywood history. And tell me in the comments, which of these legends do you think would win in a real fight? James Cagney? He could dance, he could sing. But don't let the Broadway smile fool you. James Cagney was a born street fighter. Long before he was dazzling audiences on stage and screen, he was fighting just to make it through the day. Born in New York's gritty Lower East Side, Cagney grew up in an environment where poverty wasn't a temporary setback, but the rhythm of daily life. Fights broke out on street corners as often as kids played stickball. And for Cagney, defending himself and his younger brothers wasn't optional. It was survival. He learned to use his fists early, not as sport, but as necessity. Before Hollywood ever came calling, Cagney stepped into the ring as a boxer, honing his scrappy instincts. He wasn't elegant in the way prize fighters trained to be, but he was quick, tough, and fearless. Those quick feet that would later glide across Broadway stages had already learned to dodge punches in back-alley brawls. The rhythm in his body was equal parts dance steps and street defense, and that mix gave him something no other performer quite had. When he finally hit Hollywood, he didn't shed that background. He brought it with him. His roles, especially his breakout as Tom Powers in The Public Enemy, 1931, didn't feel like acting. They felt lived. That famous grapefruit to the face scene wasn't scripted. Cagney improvised it in the moment. His movements on screen, fast, unpredictable, simmering with danger, were pure muscle memory. When asked about his gangster characters, he dismissed the idea of pretending. You don't play tough. You are tough, or you're not. Cagney's toughness didn't come from a uniform or a cell block. It came from life itself. He proved toughness could wear tap shoes, carry rhythm, and still throw a punch when the moment called for it. Charles Bronson, before he was Hollywood's stone-faced vigilante, Charles Bronson was breaking rocks in the coal mines. Born Charles Bukinski, the 11th of 15 children, he grew up in crushing poverty in Pennsylvania. His childhood was marked by loss. His father died when he was just 10 years old, leaving the family with no provider. At only 16, Bronson entered the coal mines, crawling through narrow, suffocating tunnels with a pickaxe in hand instead of school books. The darkness, the dust, and the danger forged a resilience that would later define his very presence on screen. When World War II broke out, Bronson traded the mines for the sky, serving as a tail gunner in a B-29 bomber. It was one of the most perilous assignments in the Air Force, with casualty rates for bomber crews hovering near 50%. He faced death every time he climbed into that turret, and he bore the scars of war with quiet dignity, earning a Purple Heart after being wounded in action. By the time Hollywood came calling, toughness wasn't something Bronson needed to act out. It was ingrained in him. When he appeared in films like Death Wish, audiences believed every glare and every pause. He didn't rely on flashy dialogue or theatrics. His silence was his weapon, his presence enough to dominate the screen. "I guess I look like a rock quarry that someone has dynamited," he once said, perfectly summing up his rugged appeal. From coal dust to war smoke, Bronson didn't just play the tough guy, he lived it. Steve McQueen didn't just play cool, he lived dangerously every single day. Born into abandonment and raised in reform schools, his early life was anything but stable. He fought bullies, ran with street gangs, and was arrested multiple times before turning 18. Chaos could have swallowed him whole, but instead, it forged resilience. McQueen found structure in the Marine Corps, where he saved fellow soldiers from a sinking tank, a moment that showed the courage behind his quiet exterior. After his service, he embraced speed, becoming a professional motorcycle and car racer, competing at velocities that killed less skilled men. When Hollywood came calling, he didn't leave danger behind. He performed many of his own stunts, including the legendary motorcycle jump in The Great Escape. Audiences didn't just watch him act, they watched him dare. Anthony Quinn burned, with a different kind of intensity. Born during the Mexican Revolution in Chihuahua, he grew up surrounded by instability before his family moved to the United States. Poverty pushed him into harsh labor as a ditch digger, welder, and lumberjack. He fought with his fists in boxing rings and on the streets, carrying the physical strength of survival into every role he played. On screen, in films like Zorba, The Ibaidu, Greek, and Lawrence of Arabia, Quinn radiated an untamed energy that felt dangerous, alive, and impossible to fake. He once said, "I never forget, I am a Mexican." His roots and hardships became his armor. Both men proved that toughness isn't an act. It's survival, grit, and fire that can't be extinguished. Lee Marvin, before Lee Marvin lit up the screen, he was bleeding on a Pacific battlefield. Born in New York into a military family, Marvin grew up with the discipline and expectation of service woven into his life. When World War II erupted, he didn't hesitate. He enlisted in the Marine Corps and soon found himself thrust into the brutality of the Pacific theater. His proving ground came during the Battle of Saipan, one of the bloodiest engagements of the war. Amid fierce fighting, Marvin was shot in the buttocks, the bullet severing his sciatic nerve. The injury earned him a Purple Heart, but also left him with chronic pain. He would later admit that he limped for the rest of his life, yet he never let it slow him down or define him as weak. That experience shaped the man who would later command the big screen. When Marvin appeared in films like The Dirty Dozen or Point Blank, audiences weren't just watching an actor play tough. They were seeing a man who had lived through the chaos of battle. His weathered face, gravelly voice, and unshakable presence gave him an authenticity few could rival in Hollywood. Unlike many stars who relied on makeup or method acting, Marvin carried his scars, both visible and invisible, into every role. Reflecting on his past, he once said, "In war, you learn to survive. In movies, you just remember." For Marvin, survival wasn't just a memory. It was the foundation of a career built on real toughness. Robert Mitchum was Hollywood's bad boy before the term even existed, a figure whose life seemed ripped from the kind of hard-edged films he later starred in. Born during the Great Depression, he grew up restless, drifting across the country in search of opportunity and survival. By his teenage years, Mitchum had already seen the darker side of life. Arrested for vagrancy, he found himself on a Georgia chain gang, shackled and forced into brutal labor under the scorching sun. Those early scars shaped the rugged edge that would never leave him. To make ends meet, he boxed semi-professionally and took on whatever dangerous jobs he could find, often at the edge of legality. Even after he found success in Hollywood, the pool, law continued to shadow him. In 1948, Mitchum's arrest for marijuana possession made headlines, a scandal that might have ruined another actor's career, but only reinforced his outlaw image. His weary eyes, gravelly voice, and casual drawl made him the perfect fit for film noir's brooding anti-heroes. In Night of the Hunter, His villainous preacher felt terrifying precisely because it seemed rooted in real-life shadows Mitchum had walked through. He wore his toughness with an effortless shrug. "I have two acting styles," he once quipped, "with and without a horse." That was Mitchum, unimpressed, unshaken, unwilling to pretend. From chain gangs to celluloid stardom, his life carved the portrait of a man who didn't bend to expectation. He simply endured, becoming the very embodiment of Hollywood's unrepentant rebel. John Wayne wasn't just America's cowboy, he was its iron backbone. On screen, he embodied the grit and resilience of the Old West, but his toughest battles were fought far away from the cameras. Though often criticized for not serving in World War II, Wayne faced a war of his own when illness struck later in life. In the 1960s, he survived a brutal lung cancer surgery that removed not only an entire lung, but also 2 ribs. Most men might have retreated from the public. But Wayne did the opposite. He returned to Hollywood, stepped back into the saddle, and continued performing his own stunts as though nothing had changed. Even in 1976, while battling stomach cancer during the filming of The Shootist, Wayne endured grueling days on set, pushing through excruciating pain to deliver one final performance that still resonates today. His toughness was never about throwing punches or firing a gun. It was about showing up when life tried to bring him down. That brand of endurance made him more than just an actor. It made him a symbol. Audiences saw a man whose swagger, slow, drawl, and commanding presence convinced the world he could stare down any challenge. He once summed it up perfectly. "Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway." That's what made John Wayne unforgettable. His medals weren't pinned to a uniform but etched into the way he lived, facing disease, pain, and even death without ever backing down. Kirk Douglas was a fighter in every sense of the word, a man who embodied resilience both on and off the screen. Born to illiterate Russian immigrants, he knew hardship from the very beginning. Poverty and hunger were constants in his childhood, forcing him to sell snacks on the street just to get by. Yet, instead of letting life crush him, he turned struggle into strength. In school, he found discipline through wrestling and boxing, channeling his determination into arenas where toughness mattered. His fight continued when he served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, proving his courage under real fire long before Hollywood called. Douglas's life was marked by battles, far beyond the movie set. In 1991, he survived a helicopter crash that claimed 2 lives, walking away from devastation with the same grit that defined his career. Years later, a massive stroke threatened to silence him forever. Doctors doubted he would speak again, but his spirit refused defeat. His defiant response, "That's okay, I'll act with my eyes," captured the essence of who he was. A man who would never surrender his passion, even in the face of impossible odds. On screen, he gave the world unforgettable performances, whether as Spartacus leading a revolt or as a soldier in Paths of Glory. Off-screen, his resilience was even greater. Kirk Douglas didn't just play strong men. He lived as one. Tougher than Spartacus, he faced life's cruelest blows and always kept rising. Charlton Heston was Hollywood's epic hero, and his battles didn't end when the cameras stopped. Before the fame, he served in the Army Air Forces, during W2 Point, flying missions as a radio operator, already proving his courage under pressure. On screen, he became larger than life, commanding audiences in Ben-Hur, The 10 Commandments, and countless epics where grit and endurance defined his roles. Yet his real toughness revealed itself later, when he faced relentless hardships. Arthritis and cancer tested his body, but he refused to surrender. Even as illness weakened him, he continued to make public appearances, his voice still booming, with authority. Heston once declared, "Political correctness is tyranny with manners," a reminder of the defiance that shaped his character. His body may have faltered, but his spirit never did. True toughness, he proved, is more than physical. It is moral strength that refuses to yield. Audie Murphy, when it comes to toughness, nobody beats Audie Murphy. Born dirt poor in Texas, he grew up in hardship and even lied about his age to enlist. In World War II, what followed was a career in courage that remains unmatched. Murphy became the most decorated American soldier of the war, earning 28 medals, including the prestigious Medal of Honor. At just 19 years old, he single-handedly held off hundreds of German troops, climbing onto a burning tank and firing its machine gun until he ran out of ammunition. After the war, Murphy transitioned to Hollywood, where he starred in To Hell and Back, a film based on his own autobiography. Unlike anyone else, he wasn't just acting, he was reliving his own story. As he once said, "Bravery is just determination to do a job that you know has to be done." Murphy was the definition of a real hero. Honorable mention, Danny Trejo's story is proof that redemption is the toughest fight of all. Growing up in Los Angeles, Trejo fell into gangs and drugs, ending up in San Quentin prison. There, he became a prison boxing champion. After turning his life around, he stumbled into acting and soon became one of Hollywood's most recognizable tough guys. Trejo once said, "Everything good that has happened to me has happened as a direct result of helping someone else." His scars, tattoos, and raspy voice aren't Hollywood props. They're reminders of a life survived. So there you have it, the 10 toughest actors in Hollywood history. What sets them apart isn't the size of their biceps or the number of explosions in their movies. It's the fact that they lived toughness before they ever acted it. From James Cagney's street fights to Charles Bronson's coal mines, from Steve McQueen's races to Audie Murphy's Medal of Honor, these men carried real scars into the studio. They weren't pretending. They were remembering. And maybe that's what makes their performances timeless. Today's stars have stunt, doubles, and CGI. These legends had only grit, pain, and survival. Every punch thrown, every glare, every daring stunt was backed by a life story filled with hardship. That's why when you watch a Bronson stare down or a McQueen car chase, it still feels so raw, so authentic. It's not just cinema, it's lived experience. These men remind us that toughness isn't about muscles or money. It's about resilience. It's about showing up when life knocks you down, about finding strength in scars instead of hiding them. Whether it was Audie Murphy standing alone against hundreds of soldiers, or Danny Trejo transforming a life of crime into one of redemption, each story proves that toughness is more about character than circumstance. And maybe that's why audiences still look back on them with awe. They weren't just entertainers. They were survivors, warriors, rebels, and fighters who carried their truth into every frame of film. Their lives remind us that authenticity is what makes a hero truly unforgettable. Now, I'll leave you with this question. If you had to step into a fight, which of these Hollywood legends would you want by your side, and why? Drop your answer in the comments, because I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed this countdown of Hollywood's toughest actors, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories about the legends of cinema. And of course, share this video with a friend who loves classic Hollywood toughness as much as you do. Because at the end of the day, toughness is more than an act. It's a legacy. And these men left us one that will never fade, one that will never